back to another video right here on Free Will Photos. Today, we're going to be talking about Nik Collection 7. Now, if you're familiar with the Nik Collection, then I think you are going to really be in for a treat. If you're not into the Nik Collection or don't know anything about it, then stay tuned because hopefully by the end of this video, you will have learned something and maybe identify if it should fit into your workflow. Because quite frankly, we live in a great time where technology has started to really advance and give us these capabilities that we didn't have previously. Now, I have some notes and administrative stuff that I have to go over with what is coming in the new version of Nik Collection. But so if you don't want to, take a look at that, then just jump ahead, use the chapter markers down in the video. But I do want to get this stuff out of the way so we can focus more on the edits. Now, the very first thing that I want to go over is the pricing. If you own Nik Collection, if you own a Nik Collection at some point, then the upgrade fee or the upgrade price is going to be $89. Now I'm quoting US dollars, so just keep that in mind. And if you already, or if you don't own Nik Collection, then it's going to cost you $159. All right. So $89 to upgrade, $159 if you don't own it already. Now, one of the big things that you'll see missing, and I don't know how big of a deal this is, you let me know in the comment section, is Nik Perspective is not going to be in Nik Collection 7. All right. However, if you own Nik Collection 6, then you'll still be able to use that version when you install Nik Collection 7. Now, I've never used Nik Perspective, so for me, this isn't that much of a loss because it's not a program that I've ever opened really. However, I'd love to know if this is something that you use down in the comment section. Let me know what your thoughts are on Nik Perspective now being removed from the 7th collection of the Nik software. Now, it is 30% faster. Now, I have no way of really gauging that other than the fact that it doesn't stall on me. Not that Nik Collection stalled on me in the past. It's usually been pretty lightweight. So 30% faster, I'll give them credit if that is what it is, because I have no way of testing that. All right. There's a new switch to feature, and we're going to look at that because that switch to feature for me, if we're going to talk about things getting faster in the workflow, that is the tool that I think helps me move a little bit faster, but I'll show you what that is here in a little bit. There's the quick export, which I've never really had any issues with exporting. I've always been able to export, but now there's a button that allows us to export quickly. You let me know if that's something that is of excitement to you. And then of course there's a new look. I'm going to go over as many of those things that I can call out in this video, but forgive me if I miss a few of them. The rest of what I want to show you is actually going to be hands-on. So let's go ahead and dive into Nik Collection 7. So here we are inside of Nik Collection 7, and at first glance, it looks relatively the same. All right. I'm going to jump between Nik Collection 7 and 6. So bear with me. There's 6. So here's Nik Collection 6, and you can see what the interface looks like, and not a bad interface. But then when we jump back to Nik Collection 7, you can see it's an updated interface. So I'm going to start in the upper right corner. Probably not traditional to start there, but that's where I'm going to start anyway. There's this switch to button. I'm going to show you how that works here in a little bit, and then the quick export that I was talking about just a second ago. Then we have pretty much all the same controls along the top here. And in fact, if I just drag this down, we can take a quick peek at the 2. All right. So you can see we have pretty much all the same controls. They're just redesigned. So nothing drastically changed there with the exception of this little area over here. All right. So that's the top of the page or top of the work menu, the software. That's what it is. Then over here, we have a search menu. Now, If you notice, we don't have that in the last version. This could be extremely handy because you can type in a search for a preset, especially if you're making your own presets and you have a lot of them. This would be a great way of just jumping straight to it by searching for them. I personally haven't used it in my testing, but I could see how having a search bar would come in handy. Then, of course, we come down the side here. So let me just move this back up here. And then, of course, we come down the side here. You can see that there's a new interface by moving between all of these little, I guess we'll call them categories because that's what it says right here. Come on, Chris, read. You can move between the categories. And the significance of being able to do that is very simple. It's that it simplifies this list down here. All right. And there's a new feature or a new way of doing that. You could obviously just click on these as well. I'm going to go back to all of the Nik filters. All right. Now, one of the other things that you'll see here is we have these little 3-dot systems, and these 3-dot systems, in my opinion, are actually really cool. I haven't fully worked this out in my own workflow, but again, when I measure how fast I can work, it's usually how fast can I get to the tools that I want to use so I can edit the photo as I am more familiar with the software. All right. So here I can go to add to category, and then I can create a new category. If I know that I'm constantly using a particular set of filters on black and white conversions, well, then I can create a black and white conversion category up here that is personally for me, whatever you want to do, right? So you could have sunset landscape, right? And all the filters that you typically use for that particular type of photo, you'll have available to you. Then, of course, we have pretty much all the same things here. Now, one of the new things about Color Efex 7 is the fact that Viveza, the tools that were inside of Viveza. So let me jump over to Viveza really quickly here. Let's just jump in there. And if you're not familiar with this tool, it's okay. Neither am I, because honestly, I never used it. I never use it because many of the features that are inside of Viveza, I'm already doing in a different program. However, if you are purely using the Nik collection and Viveza is like the first place that you would start, well, let me tell you, you don't have to start there to do your basic adjustments anymore. Instead, what I would recommend you do is start in Nik Collection 7 because you now have access to Viveza tools. So on this particular image, you can see I have a global adjustment already on my image, and next to it, it says Viveza. All right. It's the exact same tool from Viveza. It just allows you to choose which parts of it that you want to use. So let me know in the comment section if you've ever used Viveza, and if so, do you like this workflow better? Or do you prefer starting in Viveza and then jumping into a different program? I personally think that this is going to be a plus to have all of the Viveza tools as a tool inside of the Nik collection. I'm sorry, inside of Color Efex. All right, Color Efex 7. Now, I went through and I looked at all of the filters from Nik Collection 7 for Color Efex 7, I should say, versus Color Efex 6. And here's what I found is inside of Color Efex 7 that is not inside of Color Efex 6. The Clear View tool, you would be familiar with this if you are using Photo Lab 7. If you're not, then that's okay. But it's a really good tool. I'm not going to go into it for this video. I'm just letting you know that it is in here versus Nik Collection 6 or Color Efex 6. Keep saying Nik Collection. The next tool is the grain filter. All right, that's inside of the Color Efex 7 versus 6. HSL, we'll go over the HSL because that's a big deal.
That's a huge change in this particular version. Then we have selective tones inside of Viveza, which again, all of the items that would have been inside of Viveza are now inside of Nik Collection, and that's really just the white balance and also global adjustments. So I'm not going to belabor the point on that. I mentioned earlier that we have the ability to add an HSL, and in the past, if we jump back to Nik Collection 6, Color Efex 6, we've always had inside of the basic tools, we've always had access to the HSL. All right. And this is relatively good, but it's limiting, right? You can't do a whole lot with it. And in fact, you aren't even able to mask this in locally. All right. But now with Color Efex 7, all of that has changed. So if I come over here and add the HSL, you can see it looks way different. All right. The first thing is we have access to hue, saturation, and vibrancy. Let me just select one of these individual colors because this is where the big change is. We have the ability to not only select by using the eyedropper tool here, but we can also pull on the color range that we want to impact with this particular slider. All right. I'm doing something completely random and odd. But if I wanted to saturate this now, I am saturating all of the colors in this range. But look, I also get the ability to kind of fade this into other colors. So when we start talking about having complete control over the colors in your image, this is one of those tools that I think is going to prove to be invaluable to having complete flexibility over your images. All right. Or over the color in your image, I should say. All right. And, you know, you can do a hue shift and all that good stuff. But what's also cool here is we get this uniformity slider that we didn't get before. And as you pull this, you know, if I want to make it more true to the color in which I am targeting, which in this case, it's more of those pinks. But if I pull this tighter into the reds, the uniformity is going to say, okay, make as much of this closer to that color as I pull this further to the right. And as I pull it to the left, it's going to say, all right, you could be a little bit more relaxed. All right. I think you'll really be able to see that on very pronounced colors and over your entire image. Now, I'm going to go ahead and reset this really quickly. Notice also that the menus here have changed, whereas in Nik Collection 6, let me jump over there real quick. Nik Collection 6, we have these little up and down arrows as our menu for each one of the filters. Well, in Nik Collection 7, we have a little hamburger or 3-line menu, whatever you want to call it. So just something to be aware of there. So what I want to do is go ahead and reset the filter. I'm going to just go ahead and do it like that. And now that I have the filter reset, I want to show you the ability to mask into a particular area. So I'm going to use my my eye picker, eye drop picker, if you will, and select her skin. And I want to saturate her skin. Now I'm going to overly do this because I want to really like exaggerate this, right? So really saturated her skin. Now let me zoom in a little bit here. Let's go 50%, maybe a little bit more. Let's go to 100. There we go. So now that we're at 100%, you can see that the transition didn't quite work very well here with this color. So what I can do is start to pull this slider out, and you can see that now it's starting to blend a little bit better. So let me go back, and then I'll also pull it back out this way.
you can see how helpful that particular tool is and how much control I have when I start working with these colors. All right. So when you start to see those artifacts, you have a tool now that allows you to clean up those artifacts. And I think that that's really helpful. But what's also cool is I now have access to masking for my HSL. All right. Now, I'm not going to belabor the point on masking capabilities, especially inside of or in today's age of what we can do with masking. However, there is a new mask, which is the Polygon mask. All right. Now, the way that this works is you just click around, and I'm just going to mask in around her face. All right. Because I don't want that red saturation to go anywhere else except for on her face. So I make a mask that goes around her face. Now, if I were to zoom out, so we'll put this back to 41. So now I have my mask that's only impacting around her face. So if I turn this off and on, you can see how I'm just impacting her face, not the rest of the image. And then of course I can go and add in an additional HSL. So now let's say I want to saturate everything else except for her face, or desaturate everything else except for her face. So I'll go ahead and pull down on the saturation. And then what I can do is create that mask yet again. So, and I'm going to do this roughly. It's not going to be perfect, but you'll get the idea. Okay. So obviously that's the wrong area that I want to target. So what I need to do is hit the invert tool, and now it is targeting the rest of the image. Now that's probably too harsh of a transition. So what I can do is come down to feathering, and I could feather this and make it make more sense. All right. Then of course I have opacity. Now I'm working over here on the right side. One of the things that I enjoy about working inside of the Nik collection is I can work directly on the image. So right here, I have access to opacity, luminance, chrominance, and feather to really adjust this mask. So if I say, you know, I really want to pull down on the feather, make this a little bit tighter of a mask, but then also pull down on the opacity. So now that black and white, or that fade effect, it blends in a little bit better with the overall image, puts more emphasis on her face because I've saturated it and desaturated everything else. So I have effectively created contrast in my image. And I could do that very easily just using two tools. So that's the HSL slider inside of Color Efex 7. The last thing that I'm going to go over is this switch to feature. Previously, if I wanted to take this from Color Efex and move it into a different Nik software, I would have to export it and then reopen it inside of that software. But now what I can do is click on this switch to, and I get a drop down menu here. Now, for me, the only other program that makes sense to send this image to is Analog Efex. So I'm going to go ahead and send this over into Analog Efex, and you'll see that it's just processing the image, taking all of these adjustments and baking it into a file because it does need to bake into another file. So now I have my image inside of Analog Efex, and one of the things, or one of my favorite tools that I like to apply in Analog Efex is the bokeh tool. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply that filter and just reshape this and resize it. Just like so, probably something like that, and maybe a little bit larger. And I think that this looks really good by itself. So what I'll do is go ahead and hit the switch to,
and I'm going to go back inside of Color Efex, and then that's where we will finish up this video. All right, so here we are back inside of Color Efex 7, and the final part that I would probably do here is maybe add in cross-processing. With the U-point control, what they've done is allow us to grab these little handles and reshape this to really be exactly the size that we need it to. And this is something that I think we've been looking for inside of the Nik collection, and really just the masking capability altogether for a very long time. But now we have the capability of doing this, resizing it, and then, you know, I'm just dragging this around to show you what I can do with that. And that's something I think is a huge benefit and will be extremely helpful for all of us to have in the future. Now, I'm going to delete that one. And we're going to talk finally about the luminosity masking. Now, if you're familiar with luminosity masking, it's really just targeting the tonal range. It's not looking at colors, it's looking at the tonal range. So right now, I just dropped this onto one of the lights. And if I go ahead and turn on this mask, you can see it's only targeting the lights in the background because those are the ones that have the brightest areas. One of the cool things that DxO has added into this particular filter or masking tool is the ability to really refine the range. So if I start pulling this down towards the shadows, you can see that I'm starting to include my subject because she's a darker value or tonal range than what these lights are. But what's really cool about this is I can kind of blend this quite well. So if you end up with something that's harsh, then at the end here, you get these little tails that you can pull and kind of just fade in from the darkest area to the other area. And I think that that's really helpful when we start talking about adding in a luminosity mask. So if I turn this back off, and this is probably going to be a very subtle adjustment. Let me just crank up the strength so maybe it'll be more noticeable. But I'm adding in this color to the background lights. All right, if I turn this off and turn it back on, it's really subtle. It doesn't look like I went like crazy overboard with it. It just looks like something that makes sense. And then of course, if I wanted to increase on the highlight area or maybe the shadow, there's just so many options available to us now inside of the Nik collection with these new tools and the new workflow. You've seen I jump between two programs. Of course, if I wanted to, I could jump between any of these other programs without having to export the image multiple times and then open up that new software. I can just choose which one I want to go to, and DxO or the Nik collection, it's going to figure itself out. So now if you are solely editing inside of the Nik collection, you have the ability to move around the software quite easily. And then of course, when I am all done with everything that I wanted to do, I can click on the quick export, and this is going to process the image like normal, and it has now exported that image. So then the question is, well, where the heck does that quick export go? And you have a choice of where you want it to go. If you click on your preferences, you can go over to export, and then down here for destination, you can choose what its where its destination is going to be. Then of course, you can also choose if you want it to be a TIFF, 16-bit compressed, or if you want it to be a JPEG. Right now, I just have it set to TIFF 16-bit with no compression, and then original images folder is the destination. So wherever I had this original image, that's where it's going. So that way I don't have to go searching for it. So let's go ahead and pull that over onto the page. So this is the original image folder, and here is the actual file exported and ready for me to go do everything that I would want to do. So hopefully you found some value in the content, and if you did, then please smash the like button, and if you're new, consider subscribing. If you want to pick up the new version of the Nik Collection and potentially help out the channel at the same time, consider using my affiliate link down in the description box below. With that, I want you guys to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.